I'm Tanya Van Court. I am originally from Oakland, California. I currently live in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm the CEO and founder of Goalsetter. I only lived in Oakland for 6 years, and then my mom actually died of a brain aneurysm. And so my aunt, who lived in El Cerrito, adopted all six of us, myself and my five siblings, and she went from having one kid to seven overnight. And so she is my hero in so many ways. But Oakland is also constantly in my heart because it was that place that I was born, that I have my greatest memories, quite frankly, with my mother. And we lived on a street called Seneca Street. There was a reservoir at the top of the street. And so no one came on to Seneca Street unless you lived on Seneca Street. And so we were like a family, and it was a very tight-knit community, and really also a very important part of my childhood and my childhood memory. So much so that I have a son, and his name is Seneca. Well, the interesting thing about me, which I think is a little bit different than most founders, is I never dreamed of being a founder. I didn't dream of being an entrepreneur by any means. I had a great career in corporate America. I was at Cablevision and launched the first voice over IP service in the cable industry, Optimum Voice, when the cable companies were competing against the telephone companies with a triple bundle. Then I moved on to ESPN, and I launched ESPN3, which was the first digital video streaming player in the cable industry before HBO Now and HBO Go and any of those platforms. Then I went to Nickelodeon. I ran Junior.com and Noggin.com for 6 years and cut my teeth on how do you create content that's engaging and exciting and at the same time educational. And speaking of educational, I moved on to Discovery Education, where I led the launch of digital textbooks into classrooms across the country to help kids with multimodal learning. And it was in that time at Discovery Education that my daughter, who was 8 years old, about to turn 9, said, "Mommy, for my 9th birthday, I really only want 2 things." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Enough money to save for an investment account and a bike." And I thought to myself, if I can get every kid to say that, I can change the world. So for me, this journey of entrepreneurship really didn't start with me wanting to be an entrepreneur. It really started with me wanting to change the world and wanting to change the world for kids everywhere. A kid at 9 knows about an investment account because her mom at 29 lost about $1 million in the stock market.
Oh my God. Okay.
And so, I was working in Silicon Valley. I had gotten a bunch of stock and stock options from the company that I worked for at the time. I had 2 degrees from Stanford in engineering. And so, most people generally thought, oh, she's the smart one in the family. But the truth of the matter was that I knew what I knew and I didn't know what I didn't know. And no one had ever taught me anything about personal finance or the stock market or stocks or bonds or stock options. And so when I got this stock grant, I just left it there. I had no idea what to do with it. And so as that stock vested and as the company did well, I thought, oh, okay, well, this is great. What goes up will continue to go up. Little did I know that the 2001 big tech bubble burst was on the horizon, and that in one day, my stock, which was worth about $1 million, would plummet to be worth about $20,000 in that single day. And so, I sat there and I watched the computer and I thought, my gosh, this was stupid, Tanya. Whatever you didn't do or did do, there had to be a different solution. There had to be a different way. And of course there was, right? I didn't know about diversification. I didn't know about asset allocation. I didn't know that everything that vested, I should have sold immediately and diversified my portfolio. It just wasn't a part of any family discussions I had, any school discussions I had. So, in that moment, I said, well, look, I can't turn back the hands of time, but what I can do is make sure that this never happens to my own children. And I didn't have kids at the time, but fast forward 5 years when I had Gabrielle, and I started teaching her about money from the time that she was born. And so that's how she became an 8-year-old asking for an investment account. Launching a financial services company, to your point, is a completely different beast. The thing that I would say is the same about launching a fintech company and my background is that, number one, I had launched consumer products into the consumer space before, right? I launched great digital products, including ESPN3, including Nickelodeon properties. So I knew that. I knew what it meant to create wireframes, create designs, understand user personas. That much I knew. The second thing I knew was I knew how to make things interesting to people that typically were not interesting. So, when you're working at a company like Nickelodeon, when you're working at a company like Discovery Education, you learn a lot about how do you combine multimedia, entertainment, and education into this rarefied space and create something that's really compelling for the audience that otherwise would be pretty plain and vanilla and boring. So those are the two things that I knew. And those were the two things that I could uniquely bring into the financial services space that, quite frankly, no one else had brought before. Everyone who you saw developing a fintech app came from the financial services space. They were at a big bank and they decided, hey, there's a hole in the kids market. And so they popped into the kids market to fulfill that hole. But what they typically did was they said, hey, what is, JP Morgan or Stash? What are these companies doing in the adult space? And how do I retrofit that and create something for the kids space? And that's not the approach that we took. The approach that we took was there are a lot of people who don't want to engage in fintech apps because they look and feel boring. They look and feel like they come from the same audience over and over and over again. This financial services sector that, is good at what they do, but they're not great at entertainment. They're not great at education. They're not great at these other things that we know the world needs. And so we took a different approach, and our approach was really about how do you make this exciting and how do you do it for kids and their parents? And so that was an interesting nuance because when I was at Nickelodeon, I was responsible for the entire family. I was responsible for parenting and kids. And what we used to say was it was our responsibility to make sure that parents turned the television onto the channel of Nickelodeon. But once they turned that television to that channel, it was also our responsibility to make sure kids said, don't turn that channel. And so, having that duality of understanding that you're serving two different audiences was also a big part of what we brought and what I brought to the fintech space. So those are all of the things that that were similar. But to your point, Sheela, there was a lot that was different. I mean, I didn't know about banking infrastructure. I didn't know about how you connect accounts. I didn't know about, what a DDA account was versus a different kind of account. I mean, this was all terminology that was completely foreign to me. I didn't even know who the players were. I didn't even know, how to pick up the phone and call the appropriate back-end providers and say, hey, we need you to stand up a fintech solution for us. And so, I did what I often did when I was an executive at this major corporation. I surrounded myself with people who knew, because I knew that I didn't know. And it didn't make sense for me to try to come up a learning curve that was fairly steep in a short period of time, in addition to all the other things I needed to learn about being an entrepreneur. So I surrounded myself with people who knew. Going from a corporation to leading a small company is, probably the best example I can think of, not just drinking from a fire hose, drinking from, a hydrant or, whatever it is that's even bigger than a fire hose. When I was at a corporation, I was a general manager of lots of people who did what they did extraordinarily well, right? I had a marketing team and they did that well. I had a product team and they built products well. I had a content team and they developed content well. And so I had different teams of experts and specialists. And when you go to a place where you are leading a small company and trying to stand up a product that's your minimally viable product, you've got to do all of that with some degree of prowess. Now, you're not going to be an expert at everything, but you've got to very, very quickly figure out how you can at least get to an 80% solution in every one of those areas, right? What do we call our product? What's the brand? What's the logo going to look like? What are the key features of the product? what do the screens look like when we are laying out, the roadmap for how our user experience is going to work and what every one of those screens looks like that our users see. I mean, every dimension of the product you are making a decision about without a whole lot of guidance and a whole lot of input from other places. And so it is scary.
Yes.
It is overwhelming. It is exhausting. Look, as you know, many founders have to do that. But I would posit that when you have founders who are under supported in terms of the funding that they get early on, they have to do it even more, because there are no checks that will allow you to hire a person here or, contract a person there. You just don't have the same degree of financial support. And so, you can multiply the strain and stress that every founder feels by about 100 when you think about being a female founder and a founder of color in this space, because you just don't get the same resources to hire people early on to help you and support you in those ways. As a founder of color, I mean, we know what the economics look like in this country, right? By 2053, African Americans are projected to have a negative net worth. There's been a huge wealth gap in this country for a variety of structural reasons and other reasons that, I'm sure all of your listeners already understand. And so for me, it was about identifying where could I go for money, right? I knew that I couldn't go to my family members. We just, don't have the resources as a family. I couldn't go to my family members and say, hey, can you write me a $25,000 check or a $100,000 check? That just wasn't an option. So I started to write down where were the pockets of people who I knew who might have access to enough money so that they could write me angel checks. And that's where I started. So my first pitch, Sheela, I actually gave was at the Stanford National Black Alumni Association meeting. The Stanford National Black Alumni Association is extraordinarily close, a close-knit, large group of people, but a close-knit group of folks. We had our meeting, which happens every 2 years. There was a panel on technology and entrepreneurship. They asked if anyone had questions after the panel. I made sure that I had snaked my way over to the mic before anyone else could stand up. And I did not use the mic to ask a question. I used the mic to make a pitch. And so that's where I got my first checks from fellow Black Stanford alums who heard me pitch in that forum. They knew me, they knew the success that I had had in corporate America, and they supported me. And, it was just a profound statement and really, really very meaningful to me that, these were my peers who I had known for 20 years since I was in college, and they got behind me. So that was one place. The second was that I went and pitched to a lot of women-owned funds. In particular, Pipeline Angels was a tremendous source of support and counsel and funding for me early on, particularly because at this time I was about 7 months pregnant. And I kept getting, turned away again and again and again from the predominantly male funds. And so I said, look, I'm not going to pitch to all male funds anymore. I'm going to go and pitch to only female-led funds. And I flew to 4 different cities to pitch for Pipeline Angels because they had a model at the time. It was pre-COVID where you go from city to city and you pitch to the angel members in that city. And all 4 cities funded me in one way or another. Some of them funded me all together. Some of them individuals wrote me checks, but all 4 of them funded me. And so that's when I started to see that, there was clearly bias in the system when you can get turned away by every male group that you pitch to. But when you pitch to 4 different groups of women who have no idea what the outcome was of where you just came from, but they choose to invest in you again and again and again, it showed me that, I had to be very intentional about where I sought out funding. Otherwise, I was going to be wasting a bunch of cycles and not getting to the place where I needed to go. So by the time I raised $1 million, 88% of my funding had come from Black people, brown people, and women. Because those were the pockets of folks who supported me early on. And I am grateful that they did, because we wouldn't be here today had they not. Well, it's really interesting. I have learned more about Silicon Valley and venture in the past 7 years than I ever cared to know or thought I would know. And one of the things that I've learned is that ultimately everyone just cares about making money, period, end of story. Now, some people want to make money off of, healthcare. Some people want to make money off of retail. Some people want to make money off of impact. But fundamentally, every venture check writer wants to make money. And so yes, it's great that, we are impact focused, and it's great that when, kids who use our product or parents who use our product, when they write in, they say, my kid is begging to take your financial education quiz, right? That doesn't happen with any other platform out there. Yes. That I've seen. We are uniquely changing lives. We are changing conversations in households where kids are showing up to dinner tables and talking about the rule of 72 and talking about compound interest. And their parents are thrilled and excited because we offer a debit card with a rule called learn before you burn. And so on Sunday morning, our teen and tween debit card will automatically freeze if your kid hasn't taken their financial literacy quiz for the week yet. And the minute they take that quiz, the card will unfreeze again. By the way, if the parent sets up that rule, you can choose to do without that rule, but that's if the parent sets up that rule. So the bottom line is, yes, we are absolutely making a difference in parents' lives, but because we're making a difference in parents' lives, parents love us and kids love us too. And so it is really, yes, an impact-oriented business, but it's also a business that can make money because we have sticky customers who really value the service that we're delivering. And at the end of the day, that's what every venture investor wants. And the mission-driven venture investors, they're excited about the fact that we are changing the world at the same time we're driving revenue. Yeah, absolutely. So we have more than 200,000 users on the platform. And, the great thing about the platform is that yes, we have those users, but we also have a net promoter score that's through the roof. And so our NPS score is a 73. And that means that, customers, we're up there with brands like Apple and Ritz-Carlton in terms of customers who say, I would recommend Goalsetter to a friend. We have a product and a platform that is truly engaging, not just kids, but interestingly enough, the adults in their lives too. Very early on, Goalsetter became a platform for the entire family, not just for the kids in the family, because we found that 80% of the adults who were using our platform for their kids said that they loved Goalsetter so much for their kids that they wanted to use it for themselves. They wanted to use it to save for themselves. They wanted to use our financial education for themselves. And so we are now offering Goalsetter as an employee benefit for employers across the country because they have the opportunity to get a great personal finance tool into the hands of their employees and also their families. Yeah. And, that's an offering that is truly unique in the space because we are revolutionizing personal finance, not just for the 28-year-old, adult, but for any kids who the 45-year-old adult may have in their family too. My message to other female founders and other founders of color would be, during the 1960s, when we all watched those horrific images on television of Black people who were being sprayed with water hoses, Black people who were being attacked by dogs, and not just Black people and their allies, their comrades in arms who were walking with them across the Pettus Bridge to make history happen, to make things better. They were all sacrificing something. And it wasn't easy. Those sacrifices, though, had to be made in order for the world to change. This journey is not easy. The truth of the matter is, this is the hardest job I've ever had in my life. It is the most frustrating job I've ever had in my life. I know that I'm capable. I know that we have an amazing platform that, quite frankly, I think is the best platform in this space. And I know that we've gotten 2% of the funding compared that our competitors have gotten. And so it is a journey that is rife with frustration and challenges. But I also know that if I don't walk across this bridge, then I am not creating a pathway for someone to follow behind me. We need more women in those chairs who are writing checks at major VCs. We need more women who are becoming entrepreneurs and exiting and selling their companies and creating more money in an ecosystem where they can choose to invest in other women and other people of color. We need more people who are different than the people who have been in Silicon Valley and in this ecosystem in the past in order to create an ecosystem in the future that looks and feels different. So I would tell them to keep going. I would tell them that we need them in this ecosystem. And I would tell them that there's a whole army of women and people of color who are ready to stand by their side and help them across that bridge. Thank you for having me, Sheela. It's been such a wonderful conversation, and I appreciate you inviting me.